Hi guys, this is Greg from Wizard Den. Welcome to my Spring Boot and PostgreSQL mini-series. This is part 1 where we're going to download and install Intellij. We'll create a Spring Boot project with Java and Gradle. We'll download and install PostgreSQL and PGAdmin. We'll create a basic login system in our application. We'll test and debug our server with Postman. We're going to add some exception handling, and then finally we're going to build and run from terminal. In part 2 we will provision resources and build and run our server in AWS. Let's get started. Our first step is to download Intellij. So we're going to go to jetbrains.com/RDS/download. Because here they're offering the Ultimate Edition here with the 30-day free trial. If you scroll down, there's also the Community Edition. For project setup, the Ultimate Edition is very, very helpful. So we're going to use the Ultimate Edition in this tutorial. However, if you don't have a free trial left or you want to use Community, if you download the source code from GitHub, the setup will already be done and then you can follow along with Community Edition. So I have it installed already, so I will open up Ultimate, hit New Project. I'll call it Demo, location Spring Boot. I will create a Git repository. For the language, I'm going to use Java. I'll use Gradle Groovy for the project base. For the group, I put my company name here. The title also going to be Demo. Package name, I'll change this to Wizard Den. For JDK, I'm using Liberica 17 and Java 17. So if you don't have these installed or they're not showing up, you can click on the drop down, go to Download JDK. And you can download any version. There's different vendors. We'll use Java 17 packaging. We're going to go for war, and we'll hit next. So this is only available in Ultimate, but this is kind of like a quick start setup for a Spring Boot application. Ones we need to start off with, we're going to use the Spring Data JDBC. And we're also going to use the PostgreSQL driver. We'll hit create. So once the setup is done, we can kind of view our project. So under main, we can see the entry point to our project. If we run our project, we're going to build and run our server, and we are going to get an error because we cannot connect to the database. So there is no database configured right now. So we will set up and configure a database in the next section. But here you can see if you go to application properties, this is where we need to add our database information. Of course, we need to set up a database first. In terms of the quick start, when you saw those different dependencies you can add in. So in the Ultimate Edition, if you go to build.gradle, under dependencies, you can always change and view and add more and get back to this menu and install new dependencies. So let's get cracking on that database. We're going to use Postgres for our database. So it's open source, so no licensing required. So we're going to go to postgresql.org. Going to download the latest version. Right now it's 17.3. We'll use the default installation settings. We'll set a master password. Select the port, we'll leave it as default. Locale default. Default settings. Alright, now that that's finished, we're not going to use stack builders, so we'll just finish that. So we're also going to use PGAdmin, which is like an IDE for Postgres. So go to pgadmin.org/download. Select Windows, download the latest version. Then we'll run the installer, accept the agreement, default location, PGAdmin 4 for the start menu folder, install. Hit finish. We'll run PGAdmin 4. So we can see the console here. On the top left here, it'll show servers and database. Here we can register server. So we're going to call this demo DB. For connection, we'll do localhost. For username Postgres. For password, we use the same password as the master password earlier. Save the password. So you can see here we have a database. We're going to go back to our Spring Boot application, and we are going to enter in our database details and application properties. And then we'll play the application one more time. And you can see this time there's no error. We are connected. We added the connection here to a Postgres database. And then our Spring Boot application is running. It's a Tomcat server and it's on port 8080. So now that we have the basic setup of our Spring Boot server running on our local host, our database running on our local host, we can add some logic and do a login system for a user. Let's get started on that. Alright, so now we can get started adding some code. But before we do, we're just going to bring in a few more starters. So we're going to go to build.gradle, edit starters. We're going to go to security, and we're going to click Spring Security. So we're going to use bcrypt for hashing the password, which is included in this package. And we're also going to SQL, and we're also going to bring in the Spring Data GPA, which will allow us to persist data using Spring Data and Hibernate. So we'll click OK. Now that those are added, we're also just going to add a few more settings to the application properties. So spring.gpa.hibernate.dll auto equals update. We're also going to do spring data source driver class name equals org.postgresql.driver. And lastly, we're going to do spring.gpa.show SQL equals true. Now that we have that set up, we can create our user class. So we're going to create a new package. We'll pretend this is for a video game, so we'll call it game user. And new Java class, game user. Add it to Git. And we are going to give it an ID, and it's going to be a generated value, long ID, and we'll import Jakarta persistence. We'll also give it a username, password, email. We are going to give it some getters and setters. So set username. And we'll update the set password to include bcrypt in a moment. And we'll do the email as well. So we should never really set like a raw password into a database. That's like a major security no-no. So we are going to include a hash function. So we're going to create a utilities folder here. And we'll call our utility class user password encoder. So we're going to use a string static password encoder, call password encoder, and it'll be a bcrypt password encoder. Import the class, and we'll have an encode password function, and we also need a decode. So we can check if the password matches. And yeah, we'll go back to user, and then for the user, instead of setting the password, just this raw password, we will use the encoder. So user password encoder encode password. Yeah, so then when we end up saving a password, it'll be this hash password instead. So this looks good. So we're just going to do we're going to make this class entity as well. So it automatically creates a table and writes it to the database. And I think that should be good to run. Cannot find. So import the Jakarta persistence ID as well. And we'll run. So our server runs, and then also if we go to PGAdmin, so we can see our database here. If we refresh the tables, you can see it automatically created the game user for us. And we can see the columns. It has the ID, email, password, username. So just by running the server, yeah, we were able to automatically create the table, which is very handy. And now we can set up a controller and write to the table. We'll do that in the next section. So we're going to start with creating an interface to query the table. So we'll call it game user repository. And we're going to extend GPA repository. And you remember this is one of the starter packages that we imported. And this will be a pretty simple little function here. So basically this allows us to query the game user, and we're going to query by email. And then now we can create the controller. So we'll go here, new Java class, game user controller. So we're going to give it the best controller annotation. We're going to create that game user repository interface. And we use AutoWired, so we're using dependency injection, so it automatically injects the repository created by the application context at runtime. And we will just do a post function for this tutorial. So obviously you can expand this to, get, delete, whole CRUD. But I want to cover quite a few different things, so I don't want to spend all my time on CRUD. And we're also going to use HTTP servlet response. So import the class, import the class. So first, when we're posting the game user, we're basically going to get the game user from the request body in JSON format. And we're going to first check if the game user exists already. And if it does exist, let's use the password encoder to check if the password is correct. So if matches game user get password, so this is a raw password here that we're passing, and this is the hash password. So if it matches, we will give the user a cookie, and we'll call it game user access token, and we'll give it the value authenticated, and import that. Oh, didn't like that. Let's try it again. Yes, the Jakarta servlet, and we'll add the cookie to the response. And then we'll return the username in the body. And if the password doesn't match, we'll throw new runtime exception. Sure, wrong password, that's fine. And in case that it's a brand new user, we'll give it authenticated, we'll add the cookie, we will save it into the database, And then yeah, we'll return the username as the body as well. Yeah, so basically this would be more of like a login. This would be creating a user. So obviously you'd want in production, you probably want more functionality like parsing the email, for example. Just for the purpose of the tutorial, we're not going to go too deep into CRUD and validation and so on. And I think we should be good to try our application. Okay, so let's try to run the application here. And we got an error, cannot resolve domain type of interface, game user repository. So we just need to add the type here of the, so this is like the game user, this would be the ID, so long. So we'll try this again. Alright, so the server is running and we're going to use Postman to test. So if you go to postman.com, you can download and install Postman. I already have it running, as you can see here, but this basically lets us to send API requests and debug them. So let's start by putting a post request. So we'll do localhost 8080/game user, and for the body, so we'll put username test user 111, password test password 111, email testuser1@gmail.com. And you can see we got 401 unauthorized. The request is unauthenticated. So that security is blocking the request due to a cross-site forgery request. So we can, for testing purposes, we can temporarily disable this. And how we'll do that is we'll go to the entry point to the application and we'll just add exclude autoconfiguration.class, and we'll rerun the server. Looks good. So we'll test the post again. So this time we got 200 OK, and we got a authenticated cookie here. Can try post again with the wrong password now that the user exists, and see what happens. Internal server error, so let's just check what happened there. Yeah, so we threw the wrong password, and we could also handle this more gracefully by returning a better error for the user. So we'll add that in the next part. So now if you go back to PGAdmin, we can check the table, game user, view, edit data, all rows. And yeah, we can see that our user is here, testuser1@gmail.com. We have the hash password and the username. So this part will focus on throwing a cleaner exception. So we'll start by making an exception class. We'll do game user wrong password exception. We'll extend runtime exception. And we'll give it a constructor here. And one with a message as well. And yeah, so we extend runtime exception with two constructors, one with no parameters and one with a message if you want to send a custom message. And we'll also create another class. We'll call it game user wrong password advice. use the REST controller advice annotation, and I'll go with the exception handler annotation and pass in the game user wrong password exception class, and response status, HTTP status, I'll use unauthorized, and let's import these. Game user, wrong password, handler, and we'll just return the message here. And yeah, this will be our REST controller advice, and we're passing in the game user wrong password exception we just created. And when we go to the controller here, and instead of throw new runtime exception, we'll throw the game user wrong password exception, and we'll save everything, rerun the server, and we will send a request again with the wrong password. So in this section, we're just going to build the server and run it in a terminal. So we'll go up to the top menu and click Build Project. So the build was successful. So if we go to the top here in our build folder under libs, you can see demo 001 snapshot.war. So we can right click this copy path reference, absolute path. We'll open command prompt, and then we'll do Java, jar, and then the path. So we're running it from the war, and yeah, you can, as you can see here, the application is running, and this is how we're going to put it on AWS. Is we're going to build it to a war, upload it to AWS, put it on EC2, and run in the terminal. Please join us for part 2, where we build and deploy in AWS. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and join our developer Discord community.